Back in 2011, Polaris bought the rights to the Indian motorcycle name and went about rebuilding the only real competition that Harley Davidson has ever had. Then in 2014, Polaris launched the Indian Motorcycle Scout, and this was the bike that pushed Indian motorcycles back into the mainstream. But my question is this: in the 13 years since Polaris have taken over, can Indian motorcycle really now finally be considered as level pegging with Harley Davidson? If that's to be the case, then this, the Indian Motorcycle Chief, in this version, the Bobber Dark Horse, well, this must be a success, because this is one of the most iconic models that Indian Motorcycle have ever produced. So, specific model, Chief Bobber Dark Horse. Dark Horse means that the engine is all blacked out, and Bobber, of course, means you've got those mini 8 bars, the slightly raised bars. If you want this in the standard form, it will cost you, wait for it, £19,700. If you want it with the iconic red paintwork, that would be £20,300. It's, of course, V-twin, air-cooled, 1900cc bike, producing about 160 Newton meters of torque and 89 horsepower. It's incredible to think. 1922, 102 years ago. That's when the first Indian Motorcycle Chief came out, and the model stayed with Indian all the way through up until the company's demise in around the early 1950s. This is one of the stalwarts of the Indian motorcycle lineup. And if we talk about discernible design qualities, things that really are starting to vanish from automotive design in general, well, this bucks the trend. This is full of discernible, instantly recognizable design qualities. I'll give you a full front to back of some of those. Big, chunky front tyre, and have a look at the design of those spoked wheels. Single-sided disc. It's art. It looks so good with these huge, chunky front forks. Mini bobber bars, which for me are evocative, but also extremely pleasing from an ergonomics point of view. And look at the design of the mirrors. Everything here is straight out of the Indian Motorcycle factory, perfect. And everything is that classic American XXL size. I mean, look at the size of these levers. You would think that you'd need to be a bodybuilder to pull them in, but they've got just the right amount of force needed. Everything just feels perfect. The classical red paintwork with maybe, in my eyes, one of the finest logos in motorcycling, the Native American adorned on the side of the tank, the beautiful bobber profile, that lovely seat. And if I get you to come in here a bit, the dash, simplicity, just with a single circular dial here, and everything is built into that. I'll show you that a bit later, but you've got sat-nav, you've got all of the instrumentation, you've got the fuel gauge, etc., etc., with this beautiful black strip coming up to the top. Indian Motorcycle, 1901. Perfectly nice stripped back, fairly simple in today's terms, handlebar controls here, just with an Indian logo on each of the handlebars. It really is a beautiful thing. And right to the back of the bike, you've got that chopped mudguard. Don't wear your finest linen blazer because you will get a little bit of dirt spraying up. 2 black indicators and a side mounted here. Ignore the size of this number plate. It's a British thing. You can just make it smaller. I know it looks ridiculous, but I really like that side mounted number plate there. There's common sense here as well. Incredibly stealth, well positioned USB port just tucked away there at the front of the tank. I love it when bikes have technology that's not obtrusive, that's not in your face, that's really cleverly thought out. And then, I won't be able to show you without pointing. If you look just down there, there's a little port under at the bottom of the bike, you don't need to see it, but just there where you can actually plug in your charger. It's also got a very small toolkit, for example, an Allen key and maybe one or two other bits tucked away under the bike there. And of course, in the dial, you've got the sat-nav. So there's more common sense and technology than you think, but it's been tucked into such a retro-styled package. That's all lovely, but nothing compares or comes close to what is front and center of this bike, the engine. If engines are works of art, then this is front and center, top of the tree, out of any engine from any motorcycle currently on sale today. It's, in my eyes, the most beautiful engine currently in production. Have a look at these louvres right at the top there, and then the fins in exposed metal jutting down with these 4 pipes here leading to each section of the top of the engine. Then this engine casing here, Indian motorcycle 1901. I could look at this all day, and in a world where design gets safer and safer, to see this level of flamboyance in an engine, it's an unspeakably special thing. There are only 2 brands of motorcycles that I have ever experienced with an almost mythical level aura. It's the kind of thing that attracts people to motorcycles, not just motorcyclists, but people in general. It's incredibly difficult to explain. One of those brands of motorcycle is Norton, specifically when I had the Norton Commando on test, and the second, Indian motorcycle. Not exclusive to the Chief. I've had the Indian Scout Bobber and I've had the Indian Vintage Chief Dark Horse, I think that's the name, and both of them had the exact same aura as this Chief Bobber Dark Horse. There is something almost otherworldly about them. And take a listen to this. If I just turn the bike on. If you go to a bike showroom and you're checking out a new bike and you're underwhelmed by the sound of the exhaust, don't let the salesman try and fob you off as some excuse that it's because it's, Euro 5, Euro 6 legislation, whatever it may be. That's the reason why our exhausts can no longer sound good. Because take a listen to this. God, I hope the microphone picks that up. So if you're in a showroom and you get that excuse from the salesperson, just ask them very calmly. So If that is the case, why the exhaust on the bike I'm considering doesn't sound good, then why on earth does the Chief Bobber Dark Horse sound like rolling thunder? Onto the ride experience in general. 89 horsepower feels just about perfect for a bike like this. It's about 315 kilos and it hides its weight decently well. I wouldn't say it's exceptional at hiding its weight, but because of the low seat, it's very easy to move at slow speeds. With regards to the handling, it handles perfectly fine, but it's no Harley Davidson Sport Glide. The Sport Glide, I would say, is genuinely a fairly sporty bike, but this gives you no indication at all that it wants to do any more than a bit of spirited cruising, no more than that. But the brakes are good, the pickup from the engine is glorious, and the sound and the vibrations from the engine, front and center, this is what it's all about. I would say that in general, the riding experience categorically is everything I dreamt this bike would be about. It's the kind of thing that you dream about riding, and I've had it for 2 weeks and I've done a lot of riding on it, and I was having my breakfast this morning and that feeling hasn't gone away. That just speechless with excitement, desperate to get out at any opportunity I get. It's a glorious thing. There are two negatives. I'm going to demonstrate one of them now. In fact, let me tell you the first one. The first one is I ran out of fuel, even though the fuel gauge said there were 13 miles left on the tank. That's never happened to me before, so certainly the fuel gauge is slightly out. The second negative is slightly more worrying. I'm going to demonstrate this with a stopwatch. The amount of time it takes for this bike to fire up is unlike anything I've ever experienced. Take a look at this. Apologies if the dash flashes, it's just one of these things. I'm going to press the on button and show you how long it takes for this to fully function where I can actually use it as a dash. So, timer begins now, and on comes the dash. You can see it's still a blank screen here. I can hear some things firing up. Lovely Indian logo with clouds behind it. That's all well and good. Still black. Still black. Coming up to 20 seconds now with nothing but black. By this time I'll have headed off for a ride because I just can't be bothered to wait. Now we get a sign coming up saying, please ride carefully, motorcycles are dangerous, and I have to deal with this every time. And now I can finally start and get on to maps. But don't think that maps load up immediately. You need to wait with another black screen for the maps to start loading up as well. So by this time I'm on to 45 seconds. Still black. And we can finally, I would say it's fairly safe to stop there. 52 seconds. The problem with this is a lovely idea, the technology in here. They've crammed a lot into it. It's very, very stealth. But if you're going to put already antiquated technology into a dash like this, on a brand new 2024 bike, I dread to think what this will be like in 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 years' time. We all know that technology ages atrociously, and the problem is if you put this, i.e. technology from a phone, into a £20,000 machine, well, this is disposable. This, no one keeps a phone really, give or take, for more than 5 years. You trade it in and it goes into a scrapyard or it gets recycled. But when you build in technology from a phone into a motorcycle, a £20,000 motorcycle, well, what happens when this element of the bike becomes obsolete? Is this a deal breaker? No, it's not, but it would definitely be within my internal conversation when considering buying the bike. Well, I started off the video, just before I forget, wondering how this will compare in general to Harley Davidson. There is no way Harley Davidson would sign off on that because unfortunately it's just not acceptable. Someone commented last week, they said, look, lovely looking bike, but Is it really comfortable? Can you actually spend all day in the saddle on the Chief? And it's conclusive for me. There is no question at all. I would travel the world on that bike without question. It is all day comfort. For me, certainly the ergonomics are just about perfect. It's got that evocative nature coupled with just the entire package, the suspension, the comfort, the seat. Nothing is strained at all. It's just glorious, I promise you. The competition. Let's start with Harley Davidson, Fat Bob. This is £300 cheaper and has 4 horsepower more than the Indian Chief Bobber Dark Horse. So on paper, certainly, you get more for your money with the Harley Davidson. How about the BMW R18? This is £2,000 cheaper than the Indian. The horsepower is about the same, and it has every bit of the style and the build quality that the Indian Chief has. And finally, Triumph Rocket. This is £22,000, so it's actually only about £2,000 more than the Indian Chief Bobber Dark Horse. And if you say it like that, well, the Triumph is a freak of nature. It destroys all of these bikes in terms of that raw performance. Nothing touches it. And the fact you only have to pay £2,000 more for the Triumph makes it look, certainly compared to the Indian, like a bargain. But we're not dealing with the common sense end of the market here. You can't justify buying a cruiser with common sense. The best advice I can give, you have to just accept you're slightly mad and pick the bike that you like the most. And the best way I can recommend to do this, take all of the bikes out, a little bit like speed dating. Take the Rocket out, take the Harley Davidson out, take the BMW R18 out, and of course the Chief Bobber Dark Horse. Just lay in a field with them. Just be at one with them maybe for an afternoon and just feel what you connect with on a deeper level. And that's the best way to answer the question. The problem for me is I love all 4 of these bikes deeply, but because polygamy is frowned upon, I know I have to make a decision. And my choice, hand on heart, out of all 4 of them, would be the Indian Chief. The reason is, I believe it's got an extremely strong nod to the heritage with regards to the looks of the bike. I believe, for me personally, it is the best looking motorcycle. I think the engine note destroys everything else. It's got by far the best engine note, and above all else, it tugs at my heartstrings more than any of the others. But all that being said, you can't deny this is not a cheap motorcycle. It feels like now Indian motorcycle is back to where it should always have been, battling it out head to head against Harley Davidson as an equal. two of the finest names in motorcycling, right at the pinnacle of the industry. And with a name, the Chief, a name that transcends generations. This is a bike fully deserving of that name. This bike, in my eyes, and deep down in my heart, this bike is the real deal. And it's one of my favorite motorcycles I've ever been lucky enough to ride.